If you can't walk away from your business for at least 90 days, hands off, you're an employee. You're not a business owner.
The Exit Planning Institute came out with a statistic that 50% of all business exits are involuntary. How do we avoid that?
So if you think your business is worth $10 million, but the market says it's worth $5, that's going to impact your plan. If you're tied to it and the secret sauce is you, it's not worth what you think it's worth.
You've spent your whole life building this business, your sweat equity. Family has made sacrifices to help grow this business. If you were to have a heart attack and pass tomorrow, what's stopping that employee from just going across the street and running that business?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the 1% Podcast. I am your host, Robert Young. Here's my business partner and co-host, Doug Cellini. Doug, today we're talking about some of the most repeated topics we have heard in the last decade of financial advising. Let's kick it off.
Let's go.
Topic one. We hear a lot about individuals spending hundreds of hours chasing the next big stock, the next IPO. Here's the cold, hard truth. Return on investment is only a fraction of what determines your financial success, specifically when you're a business owner. Doug, why is that?
Robert, in our offices, I'm constantly having conversations with clients, and they immediately want to bring up, investment returns. And frankly, when we're out in the public and we're talking to parents of, at the kids' soccer game, baseball game, or family or friends will want to come up to me, and they'll always want to talk about the markets and different stocks and what are we picking and this, that, and the other thing. But frankly, I know you're having different conversations with clients in office, and just like I am, where it's our job to steer the direction in more of an educational into financial planning, right? We're CFPs, we're certified financial planners, and we're both really big on financial planning because really that's what makes the biggest difference outside of investment returns.
Yeah, investment returns are only part of the picture. The first thing I talk to with a business owner or even an individual investor is, I want to understand the cash flow. That has one of the biggest impacts. Most times, individuals and businesses are not properly utilizing their cash flow to either put it back into a diversified portfolio. Business owners like to put it back into the business. That's all good because it gets them a really good return, but they're having too much weight in their business. They're too reliant on it. From an individual perspective, most individuals and families do not pay themselves first. They're worried about the shiny objects they want or the lifestyle that they want to live. Specifically with clients who are now coming into higher levels of income, there's something called lifestyle creep. They start to buy back their time. I'm a big proponent of that. I think it's a good idea. It's not worth your time to maybe mow your own grass if you're really busy running a bunch of kids around and working in the office 80 hours a week. But what happens is they start to accumulate more and more lifestyle creep, and the bills get bigger and bigger, and before you know it, that next promotion they had is already spent before they've got it. So you really got to practice the cash flow procedures. Treat your house like a business in terms of you need to pay yourself first. Pay into your 401k, pay into your IRA, pay into your brokerage account. And if your goal is to retire at an earlier age before, say, 59 and a half, you need to pull those assets from somewhere else. So you got to have a plan that kind of uses your cash flow in accordance with that plan.
Yeah, and to add to that, it's the cash flow and savings plan for what, right?
Yeah, what's your goal?
As we are growing and as we are making more and we're getting those promotions and we're now find ourselves, in the C-suite, executive level, and now our pay is significantly higher than it was a couple years ago, your goals are also changing. They need to be revised on a yearly basis. They need to be checked to where is our cash savings plan, is our savings plan, is our reinvestment plan meeting our goals? And what is that goal? For a lot of people, it's a comfortable retirement. Okay, when is that? And what does comfortable look like? Mm-hmm. For some people, it's $50,000 of income a year, and I'm set. For others, based off the way that you're living right now, it might be, I need $200,000 a year to live off of. So what number do we need to get to in order to allow myself to live a comfortable retirement where I'm not chasing those returns? Because that's really what it stems from, right? It's usually people are chasing returns later in their life with their investments to catch up. Which leads to, that next big topic. So really there's 4 that we're going to go over. And so the first one being savings plan and cash plan and the your cash flow statements, but the second one being that risk management, and it going into just what I just mentioned is when we are looking at investment returns, what we see often is of clients taking on way too much risk,
Way too late in life.
and it's unnecessary, and it just some proactive planning prior and knowing what goals they have, what financial goals, what debts they need to pay off, where they how much money they want to spend in retirement, what their bills are, the lifestyle that they want to live, the trips that they want to take, the cars they want to buy, the charities they want to give to. How much income is that going to take when you are in your retirement years? But also, not only that, we don't want to get caught up on looking at investment returns, because everything that we're hearing on the news and we're seeing online and all the, I'm going to use quotations here, right? All the experts on YouTube and the reels, spouting off this stock and this stock and this stock. We want to get back to what return do we need on an annual basis in order to achieve the goals, and what risk do I really need to take on in order to achieve that?
And I think that's great from an individual and family perspective. But let's talk about a business owner. Do you have proper risk management when it comes to your business? If you're relying on a yard full of equipment to run your business and something catastrophic like a flood takes all of the equipment, can you survive from that? Or if you have a major lawsuit, if you become disabled, that could wipe out millions in equity, and then you have to start all over again. So it's part of it's investment risk. The other part of it is let's look at the risk in your business to see if it's adequately lined up or not. Let's jump into the other item here is proactive tax planning. There's something called the silent tax drag. Taxes are some of the biggest issues I see business owners deal with far too late in their plan. And oftentimes what I see is I ask them how they file their tax return. I say, I give my guy the information, he files a return. That is a reactionary tax filing. I want advanced tax planning, looking into it before the fall.
You hit the nail on the head, right? It's if you're waiting to do your tax planning or your tax planning appointments, are happening during tax season for the previous tax year, that's not tax planning, right? We want to be well in advance talking about things that we need to be doing, like stuffing, investments to a 401k, right? For a business owner, it's a great way to lower your taxable income for the year, especially if you are trying to exit in the next 5 to 7 years. Maxing out that 401k, having a cash balance plan, defined benefit plan. There are different avenues where you can really exceed the IRS maximum limit for a 401k contribution on a yearly basis. So Rob, it really begs the question, what are some other avenues that business owners and really executives could take in order to maximize their tax efficiency?
So most of the executives I work with over here in the automotive industry and aerospace, they need to be doing mega backdoor Roths. And most of the time they don't because they're in a very high tax bracket, but there is a significant advantage of at least evaluating, does it make sense? And we're not talking about a standard backdoor Roth. We're talking about using the 401k and using a mega backdoor Roth. And probably too much for conversation today to get into it. But most people are not properly taking a look at that and utilizing the tool that's in front of them to do that because they're highly comped. If you're a business owner, we should be looking at, does your particular plan, everybody thinks, I want a 401k. But can you add on a cash balance plan? Can you toss a ton of money in there and stuff it like a pig, 5 to 10 years before retirement, so it's adequately funded before you have to exit the business? Most people are not utilizing their business as a turbocharge to their wealth to fund their retirement within enough time to do so.
So Rob, there's really one more piece of that puzzle that I'd really like to talk about, and that is failure to plan. Right. So if you are an executive, if you are a high earner, if you are a business owner, what are some things that you should have in place today in case you were to kick the bucket, in case life doesn't go the way that you wanted it to?
Yeah, which seems to be the case quite a lot these days. You're an individual, you're a C-level suite executive. You'd be surprised how many of them don't have a trust, don't have medical and financial power of attorney. I'm not an attorney, but I'm a firm believer that they need to have these things, and just a standard will. Typically, companies for their executives have a baseline offering, like we'll give you a will. You need a power of attorney, medical and financial, and you need a trust. You might need an irrevocable trust in your particular situation. You need to be having these conversations with your financial planner to see if it makes sense in your situation to do it. Because otherwise, you're going to leave your family in a standpoint. You might leave your wife penniless. You might leave your kids penniless. I can't tell you how many times family members have showed up after 20 years of not being involved in the family, and all of a sudden they show up, they get themselves added as a POA, they get themselves added as a beneficiary, and they rob the family blind, and they do it legally. And I don't like seeing that happen. I've seen families tear each other apart over $300. Rest assured, they're going to tear each other apart over $1 million. Happens over and over again. If you're a business owner, though, you need to have all those things, and there's something else you need to have called a buy-sell agreement. You need to have an agreement with your business partner of how you're going to exit the business upon disability, upon your demise. How are you going to be bought out? Let's say you and I run a business, and we're going to do something cool. We're going to sell jets. We have $1 billion in jets, so $500 million each. I die. My wife doesn't want to sell jets. She wants nothing to do with it. She's going to sell it for less than the market value to someone else on the market, and now you're stuck dealing with that individual that you don't want to deal with. So there needs to be an agreement of like how you're going to buy her out and how you're going to fund it. You can't just sell your inventory to buy her shares out.
Well, not only that, on the flip side of that, right? You've spent your whole life building this business, your sweat equity. Your spouse has made sacrifices. The family has made sacrifices to help grow this business. Mm-hmm. You have this buy-sell agreement, or you think you have a buy-sell agreement in place, and it's a handshake deal with that key employee. If you were to have a heart attack and pass tomorrow, what's stopping that employee from just going across the street, renting out a new building, and
setting up shop?
Setting up shop and running that business.
Yep.
Not a whole lot. And then and we say, well, that's, Jimmy will never do this. Joe would never do this. And we're telling you, we have seen it all. We have seen it all, and it's always the people that you least expect it from that end up burning you. Now, a buy-sell agreement and having your legal documents in place does not need to be a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Rob and I, we have a partnership, right? We have a business together. We 100% went into this with a strong buy-sell agreement with legal documents in place because we practice what we preach. It doesn't take long. It takes stopping what you're doing, setting up an appointment with an attorney, and going through the steps. And it's as simple as that, having both parties sign the document. And that way it's very clear. If I were to pass, this is what's happening.
Right.
But Rob, I think the biggest question I have, though, is, so if I'm a 50-year-old business owner and I want my key employee to take over the business, and that's the plan, that key employee might not have the finances. So how are we structuring these buy-sell agreements in order for the buy-sell to actually take place?
Right. Step one is you got to have a buy-sell agreement. It needs to be written by an attorney. Step two is how you fund it. Where is the funding coming from? Oftentimes, small business owners, big business owners, they will either buy key person insurance or they will buy like a life insurance policy on the individual so that the business can buy them out or so that the spouse can buy them out. It just depends on what you want to do with your business, but you're going to fund the buyout that's agreed to in the buy-sell agreement most times with a life insurance policy paid for by the business. So, Doug, there are 5 financial mistakes successful business owners repeatedly make, especially if they're new to business. One of the first ones here is waiting too long to plan for taxes. Tell us why.
Yeah, and for the business owners listening, if you have time to listen, here's the thing. We understand. We get it. We're business owners ourselves. And we get caught up in the day-to-day fires, the day-to-day things that you need to do as a business owner. And on top of that, you have your health, you have your own family, you have your kids, and you have your whole life outside of your business as well. So we see constantly kicked to the side and put on the back burner is tax planning. Probably because it's really boring. I'll be honest with you there.
Agreed.
But it's needed. It's so needed. And what happens is year after year after year goes by, and you meet with your tax professional, and it's April, and you're doing your tax returns, and you say, oh, "Gosh, dang, I know we should meet. We need to really look at everything. We need to really plan for this year." And what happens is you end up missing out on installment sales. You end up missing out on potentially funding a retirement plan a little bit better. You miss out on opportunities to move into a different style of retirement plan, like a qualified defined benefit plan where you can add more to it, a cash balance plan where you can do more than what the normal standard 401k allows. There are so many different things as a business owner that you could be taking advantage of, and not just for you, but also for your employees. There's a lot of different things that you can offer your employees as part of their benefits package that can actually come off of that top line for you as a business expense. Maybe that's beneficial to you, maybe it's not, but it's at least worth having that conversation. That's the biggest one that I see. I know we touched on it a little bit in other videos. That's the biggest one that I see is the tax planning. How about you?
Yeah, Doug, great point. The second thing is most business owners have too much of their wealth tied up in the business. They trust the business. They know how to operate it. They have a lot of faith in the business because they're running it. But there are unforeseen events that could happen, whether it's disability, death of them, or even something in the economy. Think what happened during COVID 2020. A bunch of businesses shut down. They were not cash flow rich anymore, and the equity in the business wasn't what they thought it was. You need to be diversifying out of that. You can't have all your eggs in one basket. We wouldn't have you buy one individual stock at 80% of your holdings. I certainly don't want 80% of your net worth in the business as well. You need to use the business to start funding a diversified portfolio outside of ownership in the business. I love business owners. I think what they do is great, and you can build it up to a massive cash flow operation, but you need to be prepared outside of that. You just can't rely on the business alone.
Yeah, even from the standpoint of risk. Mm-hmm. The more cash and the more assets you have tied up in that business, the more potentially could be at risk in the case of a lawsuit. If you were sued for whatever reason, any assets still tied into that business, are fair game at that point. But to extend off of the point that you just made as far as keeping too much in the business, we see that a lot in retirement planning for business owners. They're relying on the business as their main revenue source for retirement. Mm-hmm. And what type of planning is going into that? And in talking about risk as well, you mentioned it, we would never recommend that you have all your eggs in one basket, that you purchase, 90% of your portfolio into Johnson & Johnson. So we would also not recommend that you have 90 to 95% of your assets all tied up in your individual business. Now, we understand that there's an emotional tie there. All your blood, sweat, and tears has gone into that business and building it. But part of that business exit strategy that needs to be developed, and not 5 years before you're looking at exiting, 10, 15, 20 years, how are you diversifying your portfolio so that way the income generated from that portfolio that you're going to live off of is not just coming from one company?
100%. The other thing I see here is that most business owners don't know the true value of their business. They think they know what it is based off how it feels, like a standard rule of thumb. You need to pay the money every 3 to 5 years to have a real business evaluation done. What is it actually worth? Not just on paper, not just what you think it's worth. What would someone be willing to pay for it? Because it's going to change, especially if there's technology disruptions and things like that. So if you think your business is worth $10 million, but the market says it's worth $5 million, that's going to impact your plan. It's also going to impact what diversification really looks like for you in terms of how much you need to save somewhere else compared to what your business is worth. And you and I see this all the time. You're one of two things if you're a business owner. You either are a business owner and you can step away from it and it operates on its own and you oversee things, or you're a highly paid employee of your own business and you're tied to it. So if you can't walk away from your business for at least 90 days, hands off, you're an employee. You're not a business owner. And we need to get you to a spot where you are a true business owner and the business operates itself so that there's a true business evaluation. If you're tied to it and the secret sauce is you, it's not worth what you think it's worth.
Yep. Yeah. Why would I buy a business where the main person that's generating all the revenue and bringing all that business in and knows how to do the payroll and knows how to do the sales orders and knows how to do the sales itself and the prospecting? Why would I ever pay for that business if that main person now is gone and now the sales are going to drop, the revenue is going to drop by 50, 60, 70%? As a business owner, that really ruins the valuation of your company. And it happens all the time. We see it all the time. And really, you have to start turning your business into a true business. And you need to be in a great test for that is, can you walk away for 90 days and have it still run efficiently and smoothly?
Yeah, because if you're the key person, it is far less attractive to a buyer. You want to get maximum price for your business, you have to be able to step away because now it's going to be a self-running business.
Yep.
Most individuals who come in and buy a business don't really want to get back involved with the day-to-day operations. They want to buy an asset that generates revenue.
Yep. And that's coming back to, we're financial planners. We're reviewing this with our we're reviewing this with our business owner clients on an annual basis. And so we're looking at different ways to develop a valuation on their business where it's not just, hey, what do you think your business is worth today? Because we need to know those numbers because we drive it back into the plan and how does it impact their plan going forward? And are they still on track to meet their financial goals?
100%.
Talking about businesses and exiting and valuations, I hear it quite a bit from people in the community, business owners. My business is worth X. I want to retire in 5 to 10 years, but nobody's going to buy this business.
Sure. Yeah. One, they're too tied to it. It's too much them. They haven't diversified like they probably should and let the business run itself. The second thing is your business does have equity in it, just like your house does. And there is a buyer for it. You would be surprised. If you can't do an installment sale to a key employee or multiple employees for them to take it over and run it, then you need to be finding another buyer. And people say, well, where do I go to find a buyer? I'm too busy running the business. First thing you should do is reach out to your local CFP, like us. Not to drive it to us, but my point is I have several professionals that I'm connected with that are running mergers and acquisition firms. They have a list of buyers who want to buy your business. It could be another individual who just wants to buy a business instead of build a business. It could be a corporation looking to take over what you've built. The point is they help you link up with a buyer. They help you do the evaluation and they help you close the deal so you can actually transition out. And then us as a CFP, we just come and make sure that what they're offering you is going to be sufficient for you as the individual exiting out of the business.
Mistake number 4 that we have touched on in other videos, and we'll keep harping on that today, is failing to have an exit plan in place. The Exit Planning Institute came out with a statistic that 50% of all business exits are involuntary. How do we avoid that?
Yeah, define involuntary so people know what we're talking about.
Death, disability, divorce.
Right, you didn't choose.
I did not choose to end my business, end my career in my business as a business owner. I did not choose this on my own.
Yeah, so you probably have it in the back of your mind that you want to sell the business or you have a need to sell the business. You don't know where to start. You need to start having those conversations yesterday, like 10 years out before your exit to say, here's what I want to do. I need to exit the business. How do I do that? And let the professionals work you through that.
Yeah, you work too hard.
You work too hard.
You've made so many sacrifices, the 80-hour weeks, the 2 a.m. phone calls, the fires that you're, metaphorically and real fires that you're putting out on a daily basis. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your family to have the proper documents in place. So that way it's being controlled the way that you want it to happen, that you have full control on it. Even if it's from 6 feet under, that you have full control on how this business exit is going to happen and how it's going to be paid for and who it's going to go to.
So let's look at a scenario. I sell jets. I don't do that in real life. I'm just using it as the example. I have $1 billion in inventory.
Okay.
And I feel the business evaluation should be, let's say $750 million at minimum. If I suddenly pass and my plan was to have $750 million and sell all the jet inventory, but my spouse doesn't know who to go to sell it, doesn't know how to unload the inventory, people start jumping ship because the owner's now passed away and I think it's going to go under, that would leave her with far less than the planned exit sale of the business. You need to have these contingency plans put into place. Like who does your spouse need to call the day of your death to make sure that you get the true value of your business sold properly instead of a fire sale on the market for $250,000 when you have all these jets that she didn't know how to push or he didn't know how to push.
Yeah, the first call is going to be made to the attorney, and you have the conversation with the attorney. Here's what's happened. Bob has passed, and the attorney is then going to review. I'm assuming the documents are already in place.
Already
the
in
buy
place.
sell, everything's in place. And so that attorney is going to have all the proper documents at their disposal, and they're going to walk you through step 1 is this, step 2 is this, step 3 is this. Oh, look, we had an insurance policy with X company. We're going to make a phone call to them. We're going to get that paperwork going, and then we're going to go to this key individual that's going to know what to do with the inventory, and all these things are already going to be established and in place. But the key thing is, if you can think about your spouse after you've passed, what did we just say? The first phone call is made to that attorney, and everything's already laid out on what they need to do, meaning the spouse is able to grieve the way that they need to.
Yep.
So it's not all just about the money and the assets. Yes, that's all great because you worked hard for it, like we just said. But what about the ones you care about, your loved ones that need to go through this grieving process, that their life's just been flipped upside down, so on and so forth. So Rob, one of the conversations that many clients ask is they say, hey, Doug, how am I doing compared to other people my age? How am I doing compared to other clients who are in a similar situation? Do I have as much money as them? What's my picture look like in comparison to them? And I bring it back to multimillionaires have some similar characteristics. And the one thing that I always talk about is multimillionaire clients and really people in the general public that aren't clients. I always see some of the same characteristics. One, they're proactive. They're proactive in their finances and financial planning. They're proactive in their day-to-day schedules. Their days are scheduled out, maybe not to a T, but they don't allow anything to really impact them on a reactive scale, on a reactive manner.
So essentially, they're treating their lives like a business.
They are treating their lives truly as a business, and they are not allowing the noise and the news and what's happening in the world to dictate what they do. And at the same time, they're very protective of their time. They're hard to get a hold of. Why? Because you don't just get to just call Joe Blow and get him, because he's with his family, or he's with a friend, or he's with a client.
And everybody wants their time.
And everybody wants their time. Yep. And these aren't just business owners or executives. These are people that have become multimillionaires living a average income lifestyle, your blue collar workers.
Sure.
They've done this over a long period of time. What are some other characteristics that you see from multimillionaires?
Well, I want to touch base on that as well, because it's the habits, but all of the conversations I've had, the repeating theme I hear is I have a process for that. And they spend a lot of their time working on processes of the business or process of what they're doing in their financial household. And they're looking for incremental improvements across everything. So they might spend an entire week looking at the process of how they file invoices in the company and how can they make it more efficient. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but if they find redundancies in there and they can take out 20 steps out of an 80-step process, they know it's going to make an impact on their business, which ultimately will change their situation.
Yeah, because they look at everything as an investment. They look at every single dollar is an investment. And I'm not saying that they're looking at it to grow, but it's going towards a purpose. They're investing in something of value. And excuse me, a vacation. A vacation is an investment into my time that I have with my family and the experiences that we want to create with the finances that we have.
Sure.
Tithing, giving to charities. It's amazing to see the majority of multimillionaires that we work with are really big into giving, into tithing, into charitable groups, churches, things that they believe in. It's quite amazing to see.
But not just financially. They're donating, of course they're donating money, but they're donating their time and their energy into those endeavors as well.
Right, the things that are most important to them, not just their finances, but their time and their energy. And they're big on passing that off to the next generation.
One of my favorite conversations with business owners when they get to a certain point is, now there's a bigger cash flow. If they're interested in aviation, what do they start looking at? Do I buy a plane? And does it make sense for me? Does it make sense for my business? I love having conversations with aviators, right? I can't shut up about it.
Yeah.
It's part of who I am. But I really like breaking it down to see, is there an aircraft that you can buy? Is it an emotional decision because you're a pilot and you just love to fly? Or can you actually utilize it in your business to get some of the key people you have to different destinations? Does that business expense make sense? Sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. But that's very interesting as well, because they're looking at it from the same way. They want this aircraft because they love to fly, but it's a business decision. Like, does that investment in that $600,000 aircraft or $1.2 million Cirrus, depending on what they're buying, does that make sense to get me from point A to point B better so I can spend my time and energy instead of driving there 6 hours in a different capacity?
So you're telling me that a person who's worth millions doesn't just go out on a whim and say, I like to fly, I'm going to go buy that airplane, I have the money.
Typically not.
Right.
It does happen, but it's usually they already have another aircraft and they're buying a toy for leisure.
Yeah, and I guess that's my point. They're being proactive in how they're analyzing, and they're going to look at everything as much as they can from all the different angles, right? And so I want to buy this airplane. I want this airplane to help get my key employees from point A to point B, to help with some travel expenses and maybe offset some travel expenses, because the time in the airport, time in the air is lost company dollars, right?
Yeah, the time becomes very valuable
absolutely
for them to get their people.
So what are some other areas that they're going to look at? And they're going to look at it from all different angles, going back to that. Again, they're looking at it from the investment standpoint, not just the dollars. One of the bigger things that I see, stemming off of that conversation, as far as, should I buy this airplane? Should I not? The multi-millionaire business owner, non-business owner is very good with their cash flow. And now anybody listening will be like, oh, sure, they're making $500,000 a year, $800,000 a year. Of course, they're great with their cash flow. We're not saying financial freedom. Yes, financial freedom was met well before that. But as you start earning more, your habits just don't go away. If you weren't good financially with $50,000 a year, $100,000 a year, you're not going to be good financially with making $500,000, $600,000 a year. And yes, we have seen it many times, right? So the truly the high net worth, the multi-millionaires are very strong with their cash flow. They know how much money is going to their investment goals. They know how much money is going to their expenses. They know how much money is going towards tithing. And they are constantly moving these dollar amounts up or down and adjusting as the year's going on. And they're meeting with us to make sure that they're being held accountable and that they're on track.
It is pretty rare that they make an off-the-cuff purchase outside of what was been predetermined from that plan, especially if it's going to be a payment they're making from the budget for a new piece of equipment or an aircraft or something like that. They put a lot of time and thought into it. They talk to professionals about it. They just don't go out and buy a brand new aircraft because it was shiny, because it's what they want to play in. It's pretty uncommon.
So, Rob, we just talked about multimillionaires. Let's go to the more everyday retiree. Here's something that I get asked a lot, and here's something that I see a lot of terrible answers on YouTube, Twitter, and the Reels. And that is, should I pay off my mortgage?
Oh, good question.
Or should I not and keep my money invested?
Yeah, great question. I would love to tell you there's a single hard, fast answer for that. There is not. And we've calculated this for a lot of different clients, depending on where they're at. It depends on your interest rate, depends how much you have left on the house. It depends on where you're at in life and what you're trying to do. It may or may not make sense to do that. If you look at the amortization table of a 30-year mortgage, you can clearly see the majority of what you pay for the first 15 years out of a 30-year mortgage is mostly interest. If you're in year 26 out of a 30-year mortgage, it might not make sense to pay it off unless you have this personal motivation to say, I need to feel emotionally good to pay off my mortgage. But I always ask the question, if you do that, I'm like, great, is that going to impact an emergency contingency plan? Like, do you need that cash for something else? The second thing I'd like to ask is, how much interest are you really saving if you do that? You're in the last 3 to 5 years? Probably not much. Could that money be better utilized somewhere else? The point is you have to sit down with a CFP and you have to look at your situation specifically and say, does it make sense for me and what I want to do. I had one client that came to me, a fairly large mortgage, and they had received some inheritance, and they said, we think we want to pay it off. What we ended up doing was kind of a combination of both. We did a recast on a mortgage. You don't hear about this a lot. Everybody says, I want to refinance, but then you get a different interest rate. And if you're one of the fortunate individuals to be in like a sub 3% interest rate, you probably don't want to give that up. You can do a recast or reamortization, depending on what firm you're working with. They'll call it something different. But you take a small principal amount of money, you put it down on the principal, you keep the terms of the loan. So if you're 10 years in, you're still 10 years in. If you have a 2.75% interest, you get to keep it. And it just lowers the minimum payment on the mortgage. What I find interesting is I always ask this question regardless of the size, the amount they want to pay off or pay down. I say, great, but if your tax bill is still $600-700 a month, make sure they understand that doesn't go away, because there's no one on the internet talks about this. My mortgage payment is $2,000 and 3/4 of it, $1,500 is principal. Or 25% is principal and interest. The rest of it is taxes and insurance. You pay off your mortgage, and your 3/4 of a payment is still what it was initially. Doesn't really make sense to do that. You're not really changing the cash flow operation of your household.
So something that you just touched on that I would like to kind of get into a little more is, the amortization schedule. And so something that somebody listening might not understand. I have a 3% mortgage on my 30-year, term on the mortgage. The majority of that interest is paid on those first 10, 15 years of the life of the mortgage. So if you are in that back half, the back 9, I would say, of that mortgage, the amount of interest that you're actually paying is most likely not even close to 3%. So when we take a look at the breakdown as far as, should I keep my money invested or should I pay off my mortgage, a lot of times the numbers say, yeah, you might want to just keep that money invested. But here's a question I always ask the client. How much better are you going to sleep at night knowing your house is paid off? And a lot of times that is a main goal of clients, to be a true homeowner, right? And that means you don't have a lien on the house. You own your house outright. If that makes you sleep better at night, if that gives you that pride of, I've hit one of my big financial goals in life, then absolutely pay off your house. This is not advice. This is just conversations that you should be having with your financial planner. But that's something to consider, the psychology and the emotional decision, because at the end of the day, the dollars just represent your hard work and sweat over the years. The dollars that you invested just represent the smart decisions you've made over the years, right? You don't get to take those to the grave with you. You don't take those dollars with you to the grave. And so being able to see those dollars go to something that gives you a little bit more fulfillment, it makes you feel good about yourself, I always encourage it, even if it mathematically doesn't make sense. Now, there's a lot of other boxes that we need to check before we give that go ahead. Like, what account are you pulling it from? Are you pulling it from an IRA or a 401k?
How old are you when you do it?
How old are you doing it? How is that going to affect not only your taxes, but your Social Security taxes, your Medicare taxes? How is it going to impact how much you pay for Medicare if you are above the age of 65? There's a lot of different boxes that we need to check that factor that in. May we come up with a aggressive game plan to pay it off for the next 3-4 years?
Yeah.
Right.
So here's a question. How many times do you hear someone say, I will pay off my mortgage and then apply the mortgage payment to a brokerage account or my 401k? What do they usually do, Doug?
Yeah. So it very rarely happens, right? And it's because I have this extra savings. And a lot of times it kind of stems back to, we've said it before, that when you make more money, you spend more money. And just because you have that extra cash flow, a lot of times you find a way to already spend it, right? And the other thing is the way percentages work and the way investment returns, how they compound, that you want a bigger pile inside that investment earning a percentage, right? Because a 10% return on $100,000 is a lot better than a 10% return on $10,000. It's simple math. And that's going to compound more over time. So does it make more sense to set up your investment accounts to where they are in high income accounts or high income producing investments that can maybe offset some of that burden on that monthly payment? So I found out something really interesting. Robert, you and I were talking the other day about a situation you just came across with one of your clients. in regarding pilots and I don't want to say aging out,
Oh,
but
yeah.
really being forced to retire. What's this about?
Yeah, so airline pilots in the country are faced with a deadline most executives are not. If you're an automotive executive, you turn 65, you might want to keep on working, and
Right.
the industry is probably fine with that. You're an airline pilot at age 65, you get aged out. That means a lot of things change for you. You have to hand over your keys to the cockpit. You don't get to fly big boy jets anymore. It's not that you can't fly, you just can't do it as a commercial airline pilot for the big industry. So if you are a commercial airline pilot and the last 10 to 15 years are your major earning years, you might have accumulated enough money to retire, but you might not be ready to actually do that. What I see is that most advisors are missing the point. You can have a sound financial plan, but most aren't paying attention to what is the transition out of that regimented 168-hour week schedule look like, not just for you, but for your family. The divorce rate in the airline industry is about 30.8%. It's hard to tie in how much of that is related to retired airline pilots, but what we see is that a spouse is used to having you gone for a certain period of time for flying international and then back, and they kind of have their own lifestyle. You're now home 24 hours a day. That creates some conflict because it's just an adjustment for everybody. So I like to meet with both the pilot and the spouse, regardless of who the pilot is, and let's actually put a plan together for what life is going to look like. We know there's this hard deadline. It is unstoppable. You're going to have to turn in the keys. You're going to have to turn the schedule. You're no longer part of the brotherhood hanging out in the airport lounge with your pilot buddies because you just can't participate. And you can still fly. You can do it under Part 91 as an instructor or some other things. But that's the kind of the forum we start to talk about is like, how do we make sure that transition, because life is going to look very different for you at age 65, whether you want it to or not.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? Because that really shows you how valuable it is to have a great relationship with your certified financial planner that knows you, knows your industry. And we help people not only get to retirement every day, but we help people transition to retirement and then stay retired every day. So because of that, we see all these different good things and bad things. And we can use that experience and the experience from our training and with other colleagues and how we're constantly refreshing and having conversations about what's happening in the industry to then bring it back to your specific situation and how we can help you navigate this. And part of navigation is here are some things that you don't know about and you haven't thought about, right? And being home 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, when you're typically gone for a week at a time, 3 days at a time, it's worth the conversation because it does impact your finances. How are you guys handling this? What's the strategy? What are we doing? What do you want to do? What are your goals?
Yeah, and that's where we get into really restructuring and designing what their life is going to look like, because they both probably have a certain perception of what it's going to look. Oh, we're going to get along great. We'll be home all day together.
Yeah.
You will not. It is going to be a different scenario, just as if someone had a major job change or a major life change, because your week is not structured anymore. You're flying in the airlines. You know exactly what the 168-hour work week's going to look like. You don't have that anymore. There's no corporation telling you have to be here. You have to fly so many hours. So I like to encourage. Most of them don't want to stop flying. I'll share a personal event. There was a number of years ago where I thought I was never going to be able to fly it again. I don't even do it for a living. I do it for fun. And at the time, I was still a student pilot. And it was detrimental to me. I mean, it puts you in a depressive state thinking you have to leave that, something that you're in love with aviation. When you're in it, you're in it. And to just have to walk away, it's a very difficult thing to do. So for the few airline pilots that I do work with, we actually bring the spouse in, we talk to them, and we say, hey, what is your life going to look like? What do you want your husband's wife to look like? What do you want your spouse's wife to look like? And then we start talking about, hey, if you're not going to leave aviation, how are you going to continue on participating in aviation? Are you going to instruct? Are you going to be a simulator instructor? Do you want to work with ground schools? I have one individual who retired from the airlines, and he said he's always wanted to build an airplane. He wanted to build an RV-8, which is like a home-built custom airplane. Didn't have the experience to do it. So I introduced him to the local chapter, and he's now building an RV-8, and it's keeping him really busy. So we took his 168-hour work week and restructured into how much time that you would have spent flying are you now going to spend building your airplane and still have time to be home with your family and the grandkids. And it was a phenomenal retirement transition.